The longest study ever run on human happiness followed the same people for more than 80 years, from their teens all the way into old age. It watched them fall in love, build careers, lose parents, raise kids, and grow old. And when the researchers finally asked what actually predicted who ended up healthy and content, the answer wasn't money. It wasn't status. It wasn't how many friends a person had. It was the quality of a few close relationships. Not the size of the circle, the depth of it. So if you have spent your whole life with a circle you can count on one hand, and some quiet part of you has always wondered whether that means something is wrong with you, stay with me, because the number you have been measuring yourself against was never the thing that mattered. Here is what nobody tells you. The world keeps score of your friendships like it is a game. Group photos, guest lists, follower counts, the who are you close with question at parties. And somewhere along the way, you started believing that a small number meant a small life. But having few friends isn't a failure of connection. Very often, it is a filter for quality. Think about the last time someone asked who your friends are. For most people, that is just small talk. For you, there is a tiny hesitation first, a quick bit of mental math. You run through the names, the list is short, and for half a second you feel like you owe someone an explanation. You don't, by the way. But the feeling is real. It shows up in the small moments. The form that asks for an emergency contact, and you pause. The wedding where the invite says, bring your people, and you count. The birthday you almost don't mention, because a quiet dinner with two people feels like it needs a disclaimer next to everyone else's crowded posts. Have you felt that specific little flinch? The one that whispers, everyone else seems to have more of this than I do. We grow up being sold a picture of connection that looks like a stadium, crowds, constant plans, a phone that never stops buzzing, photos with 15 people squeezed into the frame. And when your own life looks more like a small table with a few chairs around it, it is easy to assume you are doing something wrong. But look closer at that stadium for a second. How many of those people would actually show up? Not for the party, for the 2 a.m. phone call, for the hospital waiting room, for the move where you need help carrying a couch up 3 flights of stairs, for the version of you that has nothing fun to offer that week, that is just tired and quiet and not okay. A stadium is loud. A table is where you actually get fed. But here is where it gets interesting, because the science is quietly on your side. There is a researcher named Robin Dunbar who spent years studying how many relationships a human brain can actually hold. His finding became famous. We can maintain somewhere around 150 stable connections in total. But the truly close ones, the inner layer, that number is tiny. For most people, it hovers around 5. 5 people you would genuinely call in a crisis. Sit with that. Even the most social person you know, the one with the packed calendar and the enormous contact list, is running on roughly the same small inner circle you are. The layers go outward from there. Maybe 15 good friends. 50 people they would invite to a big party. 150 they could name and place. But the core, the ones who really hold weight, stays around 5 for almost everyone. They just have more acquaintances stacked on top. So the gap between you and them was never as wide as it felt. They have a bigger lobby. The room that matters is the same size, and there is a reason it stays small. A psychologist named Jeffrey Hall looked at how long it actually takes to turn a stranger into a real friend, and the answer is humbling. It takes hundreds of hours. Hundreds. Casual friend, then closer friend, then the kind of person who knows your actual interior life. Each layer costs more time than the last, and you only have so many hours in a life. So a small circle is not a bug. It is arithmetic. You spent your hours going deep instead of wide. That is a choice, even when it never felt like one. And maybe it didn't feel like a choice, because it started earlier than you can remember. Somewhere along the way, you learned to feel the difference between connection and noise. You sat in a big loud group once, everyone laughing, and felt strangely alone in the middle of it. You started noticing how much of socializing is just performance. The small talk that circles and goes nowhere. The plans made out of politeness that everyone secretly hopes fall through. And a part of you just stopped being able to fake enthusiasm for it. That is not coldness. That is a kind of honesty most people never quite develop. They keep saying yes to the noise because the silence scares them more. You learn to sit with the silence, and once you can do that, shallow company stops feeling like a reward and starts feeling like a cost. There is an energy math to it too. Deep connection asks a lot of you. It asks you to be present, to remember to actually care about the texture of someone's day. You cannot do that for 40 people. Nobody can. So your mind, maybe without ever asking your permission, quietly narrowed the list to the ones worth that kind of spending. For some, there is a harder root underneath it. Maybe you trusted the wrong people once and paid a real price for it. Maybe you learned early that the wrong crowd costs more than no crowd at all. So your system got selective. Not closed. Selective. It started asking one quiet question before letting anyone in. Is this real, or is this just proximity? Here is the truth. Most people collect friends the way they collect open browser tabs. Dozens of them, half-loaded, none of them ever fully present. You close the tabs you never used. That is not a social defect. That is attention, spent on purpose. And there is something a small circle gives you that a big one structurally cannot. Being fully known. When you only let a few people in, they get the whole picture, not the highlight reel. They know the story behind the mood. They don't need you to catch them up on who you are every time, because they never lost the thread. Do you know how rare that is? Most people spend their whole social lives being partially known by a lot of people, and never once feeling completely seen by anyone. You traded breadth for that feeling. That is not a bad trade. That might be the whole point. Sound familiar? Because this next part is where it all turns. Go back to that 80-year study for a moment. When those researchers followed thousands of lives all the way to the end, one pattern stood out. The people who aged best, who stayed sharp and healthy and at peace, were not the ones with the most friends. They were the ones with a few relationships they could truly lean on. Warmth beat volume. Every single time. It didn't matter how big the network looked from the outside. It mattered whether a few people were really in it with you. Which means the exact thing you have been apologizing for might be the thing quietly carrying you. Now I want to be careful here, because there is a real difference, and it matters. There is a version of few friends that is a full, warm, chosen circle. And there is a version that is loneliness, where you genuinely want more connection and just can't seem to find it. Those two are not the same, and I am not going to pretend they are. If you are living in the second one, that ache is real, and it deserves care, not a clever reframe. But if your circle is small and full, if the handful of people in it actually know you, then please hear this. You did not fail at friendship. You just refused to water it down. So let me say the thing you maybe needed someone to say out loud. There is nothing wrong with you. Having few friends is not a scoreboard you are losing. It is a table you set carefully, on purpose, over years. The world taught you to count. To measure your worth in head count, in plans, in the size of the group photo. But connection was never a numbers game. 100 shallow ties will not hold you when life finally gets heavy. 2 or 3 real ones will. They will hold all of it. You were never behind. You were being careful with something most people spend carelessly. Your time, your trust, your actual undivided presence in a room. Those are not infinite. You treated them like they were precious because they are, and a small circle is just what that respect looks like from the outside. Picture the people who would show up for you at your lowest. Not the loudest room. The ones who would sit in the quiet with you and not need you to perform, or entertain, or be interesting. If you can picture even 1 or 2 faces right now, you are not friendless. You are rich in the only currency that ever really counted. Most people are out there exhausting themselves trying to fill a stadium. You quietly set a small table instead, and the people at your table would notice immediately if your chair was empty. That is not a small life. That is a deep one. So here's what I would love from you. Down in the comments, tell me about the one person who would show up for you at 2 a.m., no questions asked. You don't need to name them. Just tell me they exist. I read every single one of these, and honestly, those are my favorite comments on the whole channel. And if this one landed for you, you might want to watch the video on people who prefer being alone next, because those two live very close together. You never needed a bigger crowd. You just needed a few real chairs, filled by the right people. Subscribe to keep decoding yourself, and I'll see you in the next